Yes.
So, thank you. I will probably not be able to see the chat, so if you have questions, please just type them in. So even Georg will stop me, or we can answer it after it. So the simple connection in JSL is via the ODBC connection string. I have it on presentation because my company is a bit keen on giving out the information. So this is generic, but we can put this presentation then back on the meeting so you can download it. So an easy way is simply have the driver for SQL Server, then the server name, and that string is just the text, can then be extended with some preferences. I usually do preference hide ODBC connection string. So when the data table is generated, no information about the server is published. We can make some variables like a database name and database table we want to access. And with that, I make usually a switch from the development. So the database, we just underscore dev for development. That's when we play around with it. And then the simple command open database with the DSN string. And then you just type in select the SQL statement and from which database table you want it, like then where t-tester is bigger than first day of this year, order by the time, and then name extruder data, and you then can make it invisible if you like. So this is, I would say 80%, 90%, I access the data with the direct DSN string. Now, for a lot of databases, the string can be different. There could be certification, authentication, and whatnot. List them all here would be quite consume a lot of time. So we have data engineers and IT department who help us with those strings to connect to our data sources. So this can be quite differently when you access to your data source. But this is a simple example. So another example we use now more and more is actually connect to Azure Cloud ADX cluster. For this, we have actually the driver 18 for SQL Server. This is this works. Authentication, we have Active Directory. So we really shouldn't do username and passwords shouldn't go into any of the scripts just because of security reason. If you have to, you can actually crypt those passages if you have to, but I would discourage this. Encrypt is just the connection, trusted server certification. No, in this case, database, what we want to access, application, and then the ADX cluster address, custo.windows.net to then access it. Because in the back for us, this is SQL database on the Azure, then we can access. So, but if we would replace the string and then open database, it would work the same way. So if it's a SQL database or an ADX, you can connect to it, no problem. But again, depending on the security setting and everything, this can actually look different. Another option is by hand, and I come why this is important for scripting. You can open the query builder. So in the new function, new tab, you have database and then query builder. Then you can set up a new connection. And in this connection, you can have file-based systems like DSN, it's like the string you saw earlier. You can just put it in a file, name it DSN, and then have it at a certain location. You can access it. Or via your IT department, they can deploy some sources on your PC by default. So it depends on your company how they want to do it. If you then have a connection, you then get the schemas of your data table. Usually we have DBOs, and then those are now the data table itself. So I have RF material, measurement job, and so on. I can select one of those. When I select it, you get to the data source. Here you see primary is my first table, and then you can here use with the join additional tables with it, no problem. After that, build query, and this gives you to that screen where you can, without SQL knowledge, you can say, I want this column, you can set filter, you can sort it, whatever. So like the earlier example, filter on time, time bigger than the first day of this year, and then only those results. Just be careful when you work here and with big data tables. This really can take a long time to download or even block the server. One thing I noticed, that's why I use it here, you see an error occurred while JMP was attempting to preview a query. With SQL data table, this works fine. If you have an ADX for the moment, they have a reduced ODBC capability. And so the preview function, somewhere they send a script to gather some data of it. There is an error in it, so this doesn't work. So don't worry about it. When I then put run query, so actually download the data, it worked fine. But when I put this as save as, this gives me a file, RF production order JMP query. You can actually edit this in a text editor, and you see this is actually the JMP scripting code you can, if you would like, copy out. So name defaults to here. This should you know already. New SQL query, connection ODBC, query name, that's the here, and then select column T1, column T2 from table, and so on. Now this will work if you execute it, but you saw earlier that you have to connect to a database. If you then reopen your JMP after a while and run this query, it will not work. You see, the connection is just ODBC. So there is no connection information behind this. You could put the DSN string and put the connection as a text in front of it and then reference to it, and then it will work. But as soon as save as is pushed again, it will go back to the default and all the connection information is lost. So how to circumnavigate this? JMP has, I'm not sure when this was done, in 17 or 18, with the JMP connectors, data connectors, sorry. So when you go to the connectors and you say new connectors, you can have some predefined connectors. You can actually click on new, so you can make your own connectors with all the database information in it. And then if you go to the query with that connection here, you see new data connector ID JMP prod. So this now has the connector, and the connector is saved on your PC. And then the JMP query, if you execute it, even if you didn't have the connection before, he will establish the connection, and then you get the data. So this is really, if you know where to go and you want to work with the wrong query or even copy out what's in here, feel free to do so. So this will work on its own. Now the data connectors actually look like this. So you have a type, a base, if it's file-based or if it's ID-based or whatever. And then you can see what's the connection, database, no value, because you can have a name, you can access here the driver, you can set password if you want, port, server, and other options. What you need to fill out can be different. I happen to need to use the ADX on the cloud-based. It worked, but I had some several try until I had the combination that worked well, because most of it is actually hidden here in the connection string that you must fill out. So on data connectors, you can have a homepage. Wait, let's go back. Does this work? Yeah. So all you see on the homepage, JMP analytics worth of data connectors. So Azure Aurora, Azure SQL, this is what we use, often use DB2 and so on. So there's a lot of connectors you can use, but in most of the cases, it's really an ODBC connection to that system. Good. So now I have the connector on my PC, but if I want to share this connection with others, there is, when you go to new in the connector selection on the red triangle, there is an option share connectors. You can then select the connector you want, push it over to select the connectors, and then you see here is a string or an ID he produces, and then you can hit save. This will generate a JMP add-in, as you're familiar maybe with the JMP add-in that automatically install itself. It's in the background the same, but he doesn't add an add-in, he adds the connector. So you can distribute this, hey, this is the connection to the data source you want to share. He can double tap it, and then he can go back to the JMP query file, open it, and it will work. You just have to be careful with the names. Those should be unique to that data source. So you maybe want to have a naming convention that you don't get mixed up. Otherwise, it will not work. Another options we explore, and we're not there yet at the moment, but you can use Python to access data sources. So you can pip install Azure Custo Data and Azure Custo Ingest for Azure database, for example. And then you can write the Python code, because Python has a lot of connectivity to a lot of data sources. And then, so this circumnavigates, so to speak, the ODBC necessity. So you just go over Python. How that looks, I don't know. Each data source has its own setup. And then you configure it, load the data in Python, and then you transfer it back to JMP. So this would be one way to do it. And I'm not sure, maybe Maria, there will be more connectors like this for JMP in the future.
JMP 19 is coming up in October. Let's stay tuned.
Very good. And this uses this functionality via Python. So you just have to write Python code, make a connector out of it, and then you connect without ODBC. Good. Some small perks I found is you saw in the beginning that open database and you put the DNS string directly into it. Another one is not to pull the data before, but just create the database connection and then reference it. So you have your DSN string like before, it's really the same. And then you make an object with the database connection. What you then can do is execute SQL, so the SQL code you want to perform. You reference then first the object for the connection, and then you say insert into, because this is the only way you can write data into the database. Insert into database name, the table. I want to add date and trust columns, a new entry. You can then have which value. So those two entries needs to be entered, and then you just hit OK. Yeah, I think there is record missing. The thing here is you see this log capture. There is a bit of a perk that this will actually prompt what he writes into the database as a log entry, and this can slow down the whole process significantly. If you say, hey, log this, please, because I think there is an error that this should be silent. That didn't work on 18 at the moment. I'm not sure if they fixed it already, but I think they for sure fixed it at 19. But if you have those spam messages when you execute SQL, you can just type log capture. That will log in the background, so it will be a bit slower, but he doesn't print it on the screen. And then, you have a bit more clean screen and not all the messages. I mean, if you have 1 or 2 messages, that's okay. But I had at some point write 10,000 of entries. My whole log was spammed with that entry. And those entry, I use this a lot, is like two entries in the brackets. You can use concat items with the comma separator, and the SQL string list is a list of all those entry with the brackets. So this is an easy way to fill the whole database with data if you need to. It's also concat item. I use it for filters. So where a value in, and then I can give a list of items I want to access. This in then also is produced with the concat items of a list. Okay. So do you have any questions regarding presentation or the small excursion?
If not, maybe I